Is there anything that your team would like to add to that? Sort of that outside the box kind of thinking?
I can't help but think we have students in our school who are incredibly gifted, who are filming, providing opportunities that go beyond the regular classroom is a huge piece, right? And not only just changing the shape and size and the way that we do our things in the classroom, providing things like project-based learning, the type of model that we'd like to be able to see here next year is just another option. It's not for everyone, because it isn't needed for everyone, but everyone needs some kind of options. And that's the part about Tier 1 that is, it's not just for those kids who are having challenges sitting still. It's for folks who, in fact, need something more, need another type of option. And I know that providing opportunities for students to create film and to go off to university courses and to connect within the community a little bit more in a different way at a different time of the day is probably the thing we need to start thinking about.
So well, and something to celebrate here in the school. And again, when we think back to that green, those universal practices as a district, saying these are areas that we're going to invest in, we're going to support our teachers, we're going to grow these practices, those real world learning experiences, that's in there in the top 4 of things that we're supporting as a district, and it would include both project, problem-based learning, and inquiry-based learning experiences, trades and apprenticeships. Those are things we need to be thinking about as a district and how to support that, but those are all kind of encompassed in that real-world learning experiences that we know our students are going to need to be global members of our society. So just to summarize, our model, rooted in collaborative learning experiences, really connecting professionals to enhance the work that we're doing in our classrooms, in our schools. It's flexible, fluid. Those are kind of motto words for us. It increases or decreases in the time intensity supports depending on what students' needs. It's not that our students go on a trajectory that once they have Tier 2, they will always need Tier 2. That's not our goal. It's really to accelerate their learning, make those things, those compensations or those supports that we need to get them and fully engaged within Tier 1, having that flexibility for our students to really be responsive to what their needs are. What's happened so far in 2012? Just as to give you as a community some ideas of what work has been occurring. We had our Success for All Day. That was our day where we got everyone in the district together to hear this language, to hear this vision, to really talk about these goals. We've really begun to use our LSSTs to really grow and look at those collaborations for student successes. We are learning and exploring self-regulation. We have the demonstration classroom. We have multiple teams visiting that, building our capacity. When we go into classrooms that are struggling, that's our first lens that we're looking at. Is how is this environment really set up? How are the instructional practices, the routines? How are students learning to grow? We have some great examples too. We have Lynn in the room, and there's a lot of work happening with a framework called Community of Learners, where our students to work, we mentioned the idea of working with partners and teams. That's something that's grown from this district about really getting students to think about their own learning and their partnership with others. So that's part of the work that's occurring. And just really learning about the RTI structures. We have an implementation plan that will take us through the remainder of this year and all of next year to get us really getting these pieces moving. It's a lot of cogs that start turning together. And it takes, when you begin a new journey, it takes that bit of persistence to get things started, but it really pays off dividends in the end when you really increase these collaborative efforts and supports for our students. So just kind of gives you an idea of a little bit of what's happening in the district this year. Is there anything that anybody would like to add to that work that we've done so far?
I just have one more question.
Yes, that's okay.
Is accountability, like some people, like there's like in anything in life and business, some people will take it on board and will run with this, and there will be some teachers that will excel and totally go with this. There's not going to be every teacher or every school. Is there going to be accountability that they're going to be checked, cross-checked? Why aren't they doing it? Are they part of it? Is there going to be goals for each school to say, the first year's a learning curve, second year, but some accountability to see they're actually getting and doing it, because some schools might just say, you might have somebody just doesn't go with this and won't,
I'll
accountability.
I'll speak to it first as a teacher in my experience, and then I'll turn it over to you, because certainly the accountability piece that's kind of where I like not being superintendent. But as a teacher, when we had this model, part of this model is teachers having collaborative times where we have goals and they're reflecting on student progress. When we as teachers sat down and we started looking at our student learning, kind of like stepping up, I think the term you used this past weekend was being up on the balcony. That sometimes when you're down on the dance floor, I'm stealing some of his thunder, when you're down on the dance floor, you're the teacher in the classroom and you're looking at those 25 students, you kind of just get focused there. When we look and we pull up and we look from the balcony at student learning, and we're sitting side by side in teams having these conversations about how our students are moving, I've watched, even while there were some of us as teachers that grew a little faster. But because we were having these collaborative conversations, and these conversations about how our students were learning and growing, I've watched even the most resistant teachers go, wow, what's happening over there? I want to try that. And they come along a little bit slower, you're right, unless things are really a lot different than what they were 3,000 miles away, but I don't think so, because I've been here for a little bit. They do start to grow because the excitement, the inspiration begins to grow. So you want that to happen naturally first.
The short answer is yes, there's accountability. It comes in a number of forms. One will be at the level of that universal screen. So we're going to get into district-wide assessment. And what that does is it provides you with data that is pretty inescapable. And it's the data that we use as a system to monitor how well we're doing overall, but then it's data that's used by every single school to map out their school improvement plans for the year. So every student will be connected to that process. I think in terms of RTI, though, the dream that I have is that teachers are going to see that when students are not achieving success in their classrooms and they continue to hit a wall with that, that there is an option for them to pursue. And it's a professional option, it's a good option, it's to connect to the school-based team, and if that doesn't work, it's to connect to the superintendent's support team. And the reason why I hope teachers gravitate toward it is because we've made it clear that it's not acceptable for any student to sit there and be continually experiencing failure. So that isn't the same thing as saying that we're going to be policing this and sort of getting in the faces of people right up front who don't seem to be all that cooperative. But at some point down the road, and we have a few principals in the room who will be helping us make sure that this model rolls out as it should. At some point, those who choose not to participate will have to be dealt with, because this is a system initiative, it is a board-backed initiative, and it is a focus within the strategic plan of the system, which means your employer has set goals linked to this model. So you don't have the option of not supporting it. But I think that's sort of the extreme view of how to deal with this. The first place you want to go is you want to invite teachers to be a part of this model. And you want to help them understand what the universal Tier 1 interventions look like. You want to inspire them, in other words, to be connected to it. But in the end, the employer has said, this is what we're doing and here's why. And by virtue of the fact that you've got a contract with us, that means you need to help us uphold it.
Like I said, when we were working together at our school level and this became part of our vision, every teacher came on board. I mean, it really was exciting to see. And we had some that were, it took a little bit longer for them to get engaged, but we never had to get to that place. And I can't imagine you'll have very many examples of that.
Just one question. I can totally see this picture of how this will work in elementary school, and a teacher has 25, 30 kids and with them all day, and you can do that kind of attention. But I'm not really getting it in high my math right, that's 240 kids over a year that they have to diagnose their individual needs? I mean, I'm not getting that.
Well, and if you remember, this really is based on those, that universal practices. So it starts first with what's happening in those 4 blocks as being as rich and engaging as possible, evidence-based practices. Our high schools already have some systems in place to support our students that may be struggling. You know, we have Bridges programs, we have LEAP programs, we have linear classes. Those are all different ways to structure the learning so they're getting what's really critical in their learning process, but in different ways to meet their needs. And the other important part of this is, you're right, any individual teacher by herself, his or herself, couldn't do it alone. And that's one reason we have to look at these teams and look at what the essential learning outcomes are, having a combination of those tests, you know, the universal screeners to identify needs. And since we have secondary principals raising their hands, I'll be happy to let them share some of their thoughts as well.
I get to attend as a vice principal, but I'm also a parent in the North End. So I think that actually the high schools have an advantage over the elementary schools. There's 4 teachers, and we get opportunities where we're bringing them all together to talk about one kid. So you get to see just about every situation. There's a kid that does well in your class, maybe, but maybe doesn't do well in another class. So we get to find out why, and we look at areas of what things they do well at, and what are those things. And that, you get, you know, you get 8 sets of eyes, or, you know what I mean, 4 sets of eyes going towards a student. And then you also still have the teams. So we still have our counselors on site. We still have our support teacher on site. We still have our school-based team that meets regularly, which brings in our, like we talked about, our SLP, we talked about our psychologists, we have our community school coordinators that also support programs outside too. So in a lot of ways, I think we have an advantage because of that. You know, when we talk about the teams working with one kid, this year we've seen a dramatic decrease in the number of referrals. We've seen a dramatic decrease in the number of kids transitioning from our school to a different school. We've seen a dramatic decrease in the number of kids that didn't pass. And it had a lot to do with the systems that we've already started to put in place. But now we're actually starting to see the success in that. And, you know, and we just look at from a short first semester push, right? And we've got a short sample, so we're not making statements yet, but we're certainly optimistic, and so that there's a lot of good things. And I'll go back to that comment. I think we actually have an advantage at high school because of the number of bodies that we have working with kids and the perspectives. One great kid, he's the best at shop, and he, you know what I mean, the shop teacher just sits there and raves about it, and you get him in a different setting and the kid struggles, and so, you know, or vice versa, right? And you know, you start looking, and we start gauging the things that kids are good at, the things that they like doing, and they all seem to come out. And if you only had one set of eyes, man, especially if you get to a situation where the kid's, you know, struggling in that one classroom, and that's all you see, boy, that's a tough lens to see through it.